let's go back a little bit, talking about the long-term play here, and Trump also doing the victory dance regarding his apparent success with the negotiations which are taking place. One, China definitely looks long-term. India looks long-term too. When you have nations that have been around 5,000 plus years, you tend to have the ability to have a long window regarding your viewpoint on the way the world works. Let's also point out that there's the issue of BRICS. You know, China, India, South Africa, we'll talk about South Africa in a little bit, is involved in BRICS, along with Brazil and Russia. Ramaphosa is going to be in the White House this Wednesday. That's going to be interesting. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But China, regarding the negotiations, CPI, PPI from the United States came in weaker than expected last week. That helped the stock market a little bit in terms of it, basically going upwards. Moody's came in on Friday night and lowered the downgraded the credit rating to AA1 on late Friday. But that was only basically, let's point out, catching up to what the S&P had done already in 2011 when they went from AAA to AA plus, and Fitch in 2023, I think, went to AA plus also. So this downgrade, although it was big news and it shook up the market a little bit, people are still waiting, bringing it back here to China, on really what's going to happen. And these victory dances by Trump before anything is signed are a little irksome, but it's all about perception. And it's about the way the investors will read this midterm and long term, and do they have clarity on what's going to happen over the next 3, 6 months, 1 year? Where do you think China views this? Are they looking at, okay, we spoke about long term, are they looking at this in a 1-year cycle, 2-year cycle, or do you think they actually think we don't care, we can wait until the next administration comes, and if it's Republicans, by then we'll be able to force some issues down that basically help us, the Chinese?
Yeah, I think that I don't think they're looking that long term because it does damage them economically. I think that they're looking I think they're looking midterm. They want to make as many deals with as many countries as possible. And they want to help support the BRICS system and systems like that. They have trading partners. They want to continue to strengthen those partnerships. And they want to continue to look bold and tough in front of their own people. However, there will come a breaking point where their economy, nobody really knows how bad their economy is. It's just everybody sort of just, there's a lot of tea leaf reading, to use a term over there. But I think that it's interesting. It was a little bit telling this morning. I noticed the news that that someone in the government there had scolded the U.S. Because of the Moody's downgrading, and they're a little bit worried, I think, about the bond market long term. So they said something, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said America needs to get its financial ship in order, and to make sure that it doesn't create real waves on the international economic scene. So they are a little bit worried about that, I guess. Or they're just trying to posture themselves because they want to look like the leaders, and they look at us as a nation in decline.
You're talking about someone from China said that regarding the U.S. debt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that brings up.
Can't remember who. Yeah.
Okay. Look, it's a valid point, and even the Americans know that, and the Republicans certainly know that regarding deficit spending and the U.S. debt, which is, I don't know how many trillions now. Maybe it's 37 trillion or something.
That's last
Might
I
be
heard,
more.
Yeah.
But the debt is certainly in question. That is the reason for the downgrades. That's why these services continue to make warnings that something needs to change. That brings out the question about what the Federal Reserve is going to do. I think in July, Powell is going to have to cut interest rates. If they continue to keep a higher interest rate, it will mean that the 10-year yield, which is about 4.47, let's say 4.50 right now, okay? It's high. It isn't as high as it was a few months ago when it was at like 4.8 or something like that, and the astronomic. It's definitely harder to pay debt when you have to pay more interest. Just
Mm-hmm.
ask the mafia or ask
Mm-hmm.
people that are dealing with the mafia. And
Yeah.
the fact that the Federal Reserve is not lowering interest rates and not being nimble enough really causes problems. And this is why I think really we have to watch Powell and Trump over the next few weeks. I predict that they're going to have a bigger confrontation than they've been having already. Powell should have cut the interest rates a few weeks ago by 0.25. That's all he had to do. He
Well, he
could have
was.
done that.
Remember, a few weeks ago was that was right when the tariffs were kicking in. It
Yeah,
was before he said, okay, some people it's only 10%, others and whatever to try and ease it.
I
But
get it.
they were all, but all everybody I heard is that speculates on this stuff was predicting that they would go down a quarter point, like you were saying, and
Yeah.
didn't. But it was clearly because he's looking at inflationary pressure from these stupid tariffs.
Well, he's using the word uncertainty, but it's the
Yeah,
Fed's
well, yeah,
uncertainty, you know?
right.
And no one really knows what's going to happen with inflation yet. And let's point out the price of crude oil and energy, if those stay lower, around 61 to $70 per barrel for the WTI, that will help
Hmm.
US inflation significantly. Okay?
Yeah.
The cheaper logistics means cheaper manufacturing also. It also
Right.
means cheaper agriculture because you need energy to basically produce crops. With your machinery, you have to pay money for your
Hmm.
equipment too. The cost of energy over the last few years has been a mind-blowing reason for all of the inflation we've seen globally. Okay, coronavirus certainly was a huge chunk of that equation, but the fact that it was caused by production interruption, logistical interruptions of for to receive the energy certainly hurt everything. Okay, so let's go back to China for 1 second. Does any of this movie craziness regarding the 100% tariffs for foreign made movies, let's say if your production company goes to Canada, for instance, did that mean that Trump was going to tax movie companies like 100% if they basically were situated in the US and produced the movie in Toronto or something? And did it have anything to do with China too?
So that's two things. So no, there was no wording. That's one of the things that people in Hollywood have been just sort of laughing about is that there's no, or at least concerned about, there's no wording in there about who gets taxed for what. It's just all very vague. And so it could be presumably he's talking about any American-based country. I mean, sorry, company or studio that makes a film or parts of a film. Who knows how much, what percentage? That's not clear either. Internationally. Well, so if you're Tom Cruise making Mission Impossible, how are you going to shoot that? You have to shoot it internationally. That's the whole point. For virtually
Because
any
of
film
because of
uses
the storyline, you're saying.
because of the storyline. But there's
Yeah.
no wording to protect a Hollywood studio from that. Even though these are Hollywood productions, you have to use international cast in some cases. You have to use
Mhm.
international companies in many cases. There's financiers coming in from around the world. Always has been. Who gets taxed, or does the consumer get taxed by walking into the movie theater? No one knows. It just doesn't make sense. Most of the visual effects companies are international. They're based in places like China for Digital Domain. They're based in Canada for a bunch of others. There's a lot of post production that happens internationally, but at the end of the day, films and TV shows that are produced by Americans get written and started here, in part made here all around the country. Different states have different incentives, like Georgia and Louisiana, and California's working on it now. And then your film is going to get finished somewhere internationally. It's going to shoot
Mhm.
places internationally. It just makes no sense. Now for the China part of it, that's kind of different. China had already, when we introduced tariffs a few months ago to China, they already shut down any kind of work with the Americans. I have several projects, for instance, that have Chinese components to them, either a Chinese company that's going to fund it or Chinese cast or whatever. Those are all on hold now from those. They have nothing to do with that 100% tax, which would affect all those. But so it's sort of two Most people think these are going to blow over because it just doesn't make any economic
Okay.
sense. You have this
So,
great you have this great ability to export the American dream, American stories, American points of view, you know, uh, internationally, our lifestyle internationally. It's soft power. It isn't intended usually to be that. It's not like we're making propaganda on purpose, but we have, we're making stories that take place here or about American characters that are international, or whatever, and they're all embodying this sort of can-do spirit.
mhm.
I can find love. I can make a success of myself. That's the American style of storytelling. It just doesn't make any sense on
Yeah.
any level. Yeah.
Post-production work in the UK is done often because it's less expensive than doing it in Hollywood, isn't it? Is that
Correct.
because of
Yeah.
unions and things like that also?
Mm, Partly, talent expenses are less than they are in Hollywood, in part
Mm.
because they have their own unions and guilds and so on, but they're not quite. They don't operate the same way that we do
You mean
here,
in the
and
UK?
they're
You said,
in the
I believe
UK.
you
They're
said,
less expensive. Yeah, but then that's why I have a company there. But and I go there all the time.
Mhm.
But the bigger reason is there's a lot of great movie stars that Americans and international film goers love, so you
Mhm.
have access to that. And secondly, there's production rebates that are among the best in the business internationally. They
Ah,
advertise it as a
correct.
40% tax rebate. So if you put in $10 million, they say you'll get 40% back at some point during production or just afterwards. It what
Is
that
that
because
is
there's certain things that make it boil down to about 36%, but that's still really good, and that's why a lot of people want to shoot there.
is that
And they have
part of the
great
reason?
crews and studios. Yeah, sorry.
Is that part of the reason why Trump might have been going against some of these things? Is he
I don't know.
even
He said
aware
that.
of what you just said?
I think people make him aware of it, but who knows what soaks in. I know for
Okay, fair
sure
enough.
Mel Gibson, John Voight, and Sylvester Stallone, who are his three gurus, I know for sure that those guys know exactly where to get the best production rebates, especially Mel Gibson. He's made a lot of movies
Okay.
internationally. So it's not like he's not being told this stuff. To his credit, John Voight had come up with some kind of report for the president. I don't know if he saw that beforehand or after, but it was right about the time that he declared this tariff thing. And then
Okay.
it was made public like a day later. Well, he's got this whole plan, and that's not it.
All right.
There might be a
Let's
carrot and
take
stick approach. I could see him doing that.